Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's Tuesday afternoon. It's another week and it's another opportunity to welcome you all on LinkedIn and my YouTube channel at Lee Foster Official and my personal LinkedIn page. Welcome to you all who are watching this right now. Will be notified that I'm now live. Welcome to this week's edition of the Newpreneur Special Edition Business Data Series. And I've got the great pleasure to welcome along our special guest every week, and that is the one and only Louisa Stewart from Blue Ninja. Louisa, how are you today? Are you well?
Very well, Lee. Thank you again for having me. Gosh, last week was so much fun. I really enjoyed it.
Brilliant. It was really good fun, and especially this week for everybody, we're going to be sharing information. Well, Louisa's going to be sharing everything today from Blue Ninja, all about mapping your business. And what
Yeah.
we mean by that, just briefly, is just thinking about the workflow, the system, the process, but the workflow. Do you have one? So we're going to be sharing a bit of information on that one. And we've got you all for the next 20 to 25 minutes at least to share with you. Now, if you are live and you listen to us right now and you're watching it live on LinkedIn and YouTube, please don't forget to drop a comment, add a question, fire something into the comment or the feed below LinkedIn or YouTube. And me and Louisa will get round to that as quick as we possibly can. And I'll give you a bit of recognition at the same time, whoever's online with us also. So, Louisa, you ready to kick things off?
I am indeed, Lee.
Come on, then give us some more information about mapping your business. What's that about this time then?
Oh, I love this topic so much. This is really where my strengths are in what I do. And it's a strength that other people can have and utilize it to really grow your business. But I think it's one of those things where people are a little unsure, how to understand their workflows, how to map them, and what to do with them. So today's episode is going to be really, really helpful, I'm sure, for a lot of your listeners.
Yeah.
So let's start with what is business workflow. So this is a series of tasks or steps that you take in order to complete a business process. It's how your business works. It's what it does, in what order, and with what tools. And as you know, tools are very close to my heart. So there are a few key features to workflows. They are structured, so the steps happen in a consistent and logical order. They're repeatable, so the same process is followed each time. They're goal oriented, so they have a purpose, they have a specific task. Sorry, they have a process that's flowed each time. So you've got work throughs, goal oriented. So you're onboarding new clients, perhaps you're processing invoices. They have a specific task and they often have multiple people or tools involved. So structured, repeatable, goal oriented, and they have multiple people or tools. So so it sounds quite simple. And as you and I know, Lee, we talked about mapping Revitalize, and the more we talked about it, the more we discovered, didn't we, as we went through the process?
Yeah, it was interesting when you start delving into the layers and you start looking to see where your business is, what you cover, what you do, and also some of the step points of what you're collecting and mapping it out. It becomes quite interesting about the journey and looking at where it came from as well, and looking at where you want to take it to. I think is really important. But
Yeah.
how do you think that people understand? Do you think people really understand mapping their business workflow? Do you think people know what that means, Louisa? Probably.
I think they have an idea. So information's flowing through your business, but do you actually see that as a workflow, or do you see it as like touch points or something else? It's the same kind of thing. It's like when you start with information, where is it going to and what are you doing with it? And we talked about last week a lot about understanding your data. The workflow is just another part of that whole picture of your business, of the way that your data moves in your business and the information that's coming in and what you do with it. I do have a map. So let's share that map now. I want to work
Yeah.
through what a basic workflow looks like. And this would apply to quite a lot of service-based businesses where people are finding you from a touch point. So your website's usually the main touch point for someone to get to know you a little bit. It might be that you have blog posts that go out, you've got social media content, you may have resources or things that you're sharing that people go somewhere to find out more. So very basic. Website's usually it. It might be a landing page. It might be maybe a Facebook page or something or other. It depends on how far in your business you might be. But websites are usually the thing we're looking for. Now, when someone goes to your website, that's fine. But what do you want to do with them once they're there? You probably want to engage with them. In order to engage with someone, you have to ask them for information in order to engage with them. So you're looking for an email address. Very basic. If you're in sales, you might be asking for maybe an email address and a phone number because you might want to phone them. So the first step, let's go on to the next slide. Let me just go over here.
There we go.
So the social proof is where they start from, but then they have an initial commitment. So they're giving you their information and trusting that you will do something with it. And most often this is you're signing up to a mailing list, or you're signing up to download a resource. So you're giving them something for their information. So that's a part of a workflow, a very, very basic step of here is the information I'm presenting you with. I'm going to give you my email address as part of this very, very basic workflow. Now, that information has to go somewhere. And this is where I think a lot of people get tripped up. It's like, oh my God, I don't know how to use a marketing system, or it's very complicated. It can be as simple as it goes into your email address. So you can gather it in your email account and you manually put it into an Excel spreadsheet. I mean, that is the same principle, very, very simplified. But the initial commitment is there that someone's given you something. So let me go through into the next one.
So I guess this was like how you map out your business, really. This is giving you the building blocks to make the most of it, Louisa, yeah?
It is. And I mean, this is really basic. I wanted to show what a basic workflow could look like, because I think sometimes we get overwhelmed by the idea of workflows that we don't kind of go into the, the basics of how's information flowing, and an email address is the simplest form of data that you can communicate with, but it has to go somewhere. So we're nurturing that information that has been given to you, that email address, a name. Often you ask for a first name and email address as the basics. You can email back going, "Hi, Lee, let me tell you something about what I'm doing." It's a little bit more personalized, but the structure of it is a very basic collection. So you're going to be nurturing in email marketing, CRM. You might just have an Excel spreadsheet. Absolutely fine. I'm not here to diss anyone who is starting out, who's not quite there for tools yet. But then you're going to be passing on interesting news and information to those people. So a newsletter is pretty much the easiest way of building a workflow that is then communicating out your message to the contacts that have trusted you with an email address. You could automate some of the flows if you have the capability to do that. I like MailerLite because I have it for free with 500 contacts, and it has basic automation, really simple to use, and I can group information according to where it's come from, which for me is quite important because I want to make sure that my messaging is going out to the right people in the right way. So I use a newsletter. So when someone signs up on my website, it goes into MailerLite, and then they go into a group that I then email them a newsletter probably every couple of weeks.
Brilliant.
If I had a product that I wanted to share with them, or if they downloaded a resource, you might have an automation that would then email out the resource. So you can see very, very basic workflow, but there are steps in there that will be repeatable. So you might have 10 people that sign up on your website. They're going to be processed exactly the same way. Doesn't matter who they are. The workflow is there. It's consistent. It's repeatable. Your goal is probably going to be conversions. So you want to turn those people that have started with that initial contact to a full commitment. So really basic workflow. Let me just go back for a second so you can see the full flow. But I think if anyone has never done a workflow before, start with this. Start with, do you have blog posts? Do you have social media? Put those into there. Be specific about what you've got here. How long before you send out a newsletter? What is the process of an automation perhaps? All of that has a timeline on it.
Because it could be given away like a freebie or a PDF or something like that. And I think it's important that we look at capturing that data at the beginning. So someone's made an inquiry on your website, for example, Louisa, and then you might say, well, thanks for making an inquiry. The next day, just a basic workflow could be like, well, here's a free PDF guide. Click, bang, it's gone out to you. And then once they've received it, they might get something else maybe in a couple of weeks' time, correct?
Exactly. Yeah. It doesn't have to be complex to be a workflow. So I think that's kind of what we're trying to say today is, start off with a blank piece of paper and just start designing those touch points that you already have in place, because you must have something. If you're in business, there will be some form of contact. It might be that you use LinkedIn and you outreach there. That is, if you're asking someone to do something with you there, that's something you can map in your workflow. Okay, so let's move on from that. I want to now, if you want to take off the presentation there, that'd be great.
Hello, everybody. Thank you.
Great. So what are the key things that we're looking out for? So these are the core activities that generally go into a business workflow. So sales, we've talked about. Customer onboarding. So you could have a workflow for the way that once someone has initially said yes, you could have a process for them that onboards them. So it's sending them information about how how it might work with them. What are the rules perhaps that you apply. So it might be that you have how many hours that you're providing to that customer, who's going to be involved in that. You might want to introduce your team. All that can also be mapped out in a nice workflow. Service delivery. I'm very project oriented, so I tend to have project management steps that I take, and it might be that I track hours against that. So I know in that type of workflow, I'm going to have to then report on those hours. So I have to capture them somewhere. So I have in my workflow a tool that I use for my project management.
Well, that's interesting, because that's more like an administration background for you, like, so you can keep a track on what time you're dedicating to each project, I guess, then.
It is. It absolutely is. But I have to make sure in my workflow that I have a part of that. So often when you're doing your own work for your business, you'd never track your hours. But when it's project based, you have to track those hours. So it really has to be a part of your workflow. It's repeatable. It's goal oriented. It has a purpose. So it's interesting. I think that sometimes you kind of think of those things not as a part of a workflow, but just as a single step. It's like, oh, I use this to track my hours. But in that, you then invoice them. You have invoicing and payments. So there's a step that has in the workflow that says, I have worked these hours. I need to be paid this much money, because that's a part of my customer onboarding of how much they're gonna pay me for my work. And then you'll have a process of how you invoice and then get paid. Marketing and lead generation. Think of the workflow that you have of when you release a new product or a new service, or you want to tell people about something. It might be a new resource that you're launching. That will have a process flow, because what you want to do is put it out into your socials. It might be that you look at your data to see what the best times of day are. Build that into your workflow of saying, on Thursdays, it's the best time of the week for me to then communicate with my audience. And customer support. We talked a lot about this in the session last week about how important customer support is. And your process for customer support really is about, if someone asks you a question, how do you respond to that? What's the time frame of response? Do you have a standard response? Is it customized? There's all these different questions that probably come up, but the workflow of a customer support will probably, again, follow the same logical pattern.
So I guess, could you, just a quick question on this one, for the just go back just one step to marketing and leads, right? So you look at the marketing side of it. Could you design a workflow that would be around sort of your social media, one platform, and then going through like an email campaign that you're doing? Could you break it down into bite-sized chunks?
You could absolutely do that. And I recommend doing it. Even things like if you are using, say, Instagram, you can also then apply that to Facebook. You can use Meta to then schedule. You've got tools at your disposal to be able to then build into the workflow of what time of day do you put your content out. LinkedIn could be very, very interesting to map,
Yeah.
because you're also mapping, say if you have a person that you meet, so you link in with them. You could then maybe have a workflow that says, maybe 3 days after, you then send them an initial introduction. You could map that out. So every time you have a new contact in LinkedIn, you then follow the same process again and again to say, here is my default messaging. If they answer, have a conversation. So the workflow might be, what is your goal with that person? Is it to build a relationship? Is it to bring in business? Is it to collaborate? Like, there might be a reason that you have for reaching out to that person, or building that relationship with them. And you can define all these in a workflow. I would say that a lot of people have these in their head. And I know how many business owners sort of talk about, oh yeah, that's what I do. It is there. And so your brain is actually mapping it out for you. This is actually a tangible map. So you're actually putting it down on paper to see. And that is a benefit, because it means that you can actually look for opportunities and gaps when you start to see it written down, because often your brain is trying to shortcut to make it as easy as possible for you.
Yeah.
So it's quite an interesting thing, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's really interesting, because when you think about, I think everyone thinks they're doing a workflow themselves naturally, organically, maybe automatic pilot, without even writing it down. And I think when the exercise that I did with you a fair time ago, that we broke it all down into bite-sized chunks and looked at each part of my business, which I think is really important for everybody who's watching and listening to this as well. As you look at it, not just from one area of business, look at it. If you got 3 areas, work on them. If it's like you got a product and service that you provide, if it's an e-commerce, if it's online, if it's a training event, if it's a course, you can break it down at each one of those and look at. What I like about what you mentioned about LinkedIn is the touch points. Made connection when did you get the first meeting with them booked in? Was it 3 days later? Was it a virtual meeting? Was it in-person meeting? Did you send that introduction? Have you done that follow-up? Have you done this? It's really interesting when you look at that into more detail.
It is. And so each process has an input and an output. So inputs are, what are the triggers? So in the example I gave earlier, the form is completed. That's an input. Contract is signed. Payment is made. The outputs are, what is the end result of that action? So, when someone completes a form, what is the action? You're going to send them something. Otherwise, why would you collect their email address? So contract is signed, you're going to start a project. Payment is made, you're going to mark their invoices as paid. So there's actions that happen throughout the workflow where an input comes in and an output occurs.
Yeah. So when we've gone through the likes of the key things to look at and to focus on within your business, you've got to really take time to put all that together.
You do. And I mean, workflow clarifies who does what, who approves what, and who needs to be kept in the loop. And even if you're a solopreneur, you would still have actions by potential clients. When you're working with a client, you will have inputs from them at times where they're signing off what you're doing, or they're providing feedback, or there's a part of that process that has external stakeholders that might be involved. If you're developing a new resource, it might be input from other business owners or friends of yours that you want to get feedback from them. So you can actually build that up into a workflow of saying, as I'm developing a new resource, it might be that I have to start here. I develop the idea, and then I go into Canva, and then I design it. But then I might run that by a couple of people to get their inputs into whether it's it's clear enough. Do they think it's ready to go out? Then you might put that into a PDF, perhaps, that then generates a link that you share with people, and then they provide their email address to then get that resource. Like it's a full workflow.
You've touched on something again there as well, because everyone probably may be watching and listening. They might not be thinking this, but they might think this is designed for teams, but it's not. It's designed also for solopreneurs and people who work for themselves, because they may have people who do external jobs for them, like a personal assistant, the likes of an accountant. You can actually include this into your back office system as well, not just for sales and marketing, for your back office.
Yeah, and I really recommend it. If you are bringing people in to provide you, show them your workflow so they understand how you work. Because sometimes it's hard to it's hard to explain it, but I
True.
think when someone looks at it, they can see and understand it. It might not be that you share everything, but you might be able to say, look, you're my personal assistant. This is what the expectations are. Here is how I work. And you can actually show them a workflow of the way that you work. And it's much easier because then they've got a reference point to go back to and go, okay, so when this happens, I have to do that in order for you to then get that information.
Love
You
that.
can really make it simple for people. But unless it's written down, they have to keep coming back and asking you, so what do I do next? How does this work? So, I think bottlenecks occur when a workflow doesn't have a clear owner or responsibility.
Yeah.
Even if you're a solopreneur, it might be if you say that you're going to take 3 days to do something and it takes you a week, it affects the ability of that workflow to be consistent and timely. There's one thing that I do that I think would be very beneficial, and this is something I find that I thought it was more common than it actually is. So I look at the tools and systems that are a part of my business. And what I do is I write them down on Post-it notes, and then I put them on a table, and I actually look at what I've got. And this is something that might actually help you to define how many tools and systems you actually have and what they do. So I recommend, if you've never done this before, is just a notepad, piece of paper, whatever, write down all the tools and systems you use in your business and then spread them out and start to look at them and group them. You might find that you have duplicates. It might be that the tool isn't right for you, but sometimes just the act of putting them down and being able to visually look at them can be an enormous help, because then you're looking at the workflows and where they fit into your business. Even things like paper-based systems. So Lee, I know that you write in a diary, so you keep a written agenda as well as an electronic agenda.
I've got it with me. Doesn't go anywhere else with me all the time. Yes.
Is part of your process to write it in a diary. And it's fine if it is a manual step that you actually physically write on a piece of paper when, you have a phone call or something with someone, and you write it down, and then later on you then put it in your electronic diary. It might be that workflow works for you. There might be ways of speeding that up, but it might mean that you also miss things if you don't do that. So, think about not only electronic, but your own methods of gathering information.
I think that's a good one as well. I mean, I use a manual and technology, so I try and embrace both. But a lot of manual is me that it gets out of here on a bit of paper and it's all written out, and I can make a note, and then I can action it on the end of the day. That's my own little routine and process.
Yeah.
And then, like, I've just done something today. I know I've got to get a running order organized at the beginning of August or something, but then I also know that there's got to be a calendar invite built together, and I've got to invite all my delegates to it as well. So that's a manual process, but I'll be using a bit of technology once I've got it all mapped out properly.
Yeah, and I bet you do that every month. So you have a process that you follow.
Yep.
That kind of, you have an action, and each time, and it's really important that you hit that milestone in part of that work and that workflow, because if you don't, people won't get the information in time.
Correct. Yeah.
So let's go on to the issues.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The problematic workflows. So I think one of the things that is really, really obvious is repeated mistakes. If your workflow isn't working properly, chances are you're going to make a mistake. So in that instance, if you, Lee, don't get that out in time and you keep doing that, it means something's wrong in your workflow, that you seem to be missing that step. Delays or slow handovers. This might be something as simple as replying to someone, which, in this day and age, we are overwhelmed by information. True. I don't know about you, but how many emails do you get every day? It's a lot of noise.
Yeah.
And in your workflow, you probably don't have distractions built in, but they're there. Yeah. It might be that you need more time, or something happens that delays you, and you can't then provide that information to the next touch point, for instance. So if you're working with a team, it might be that it takes you long to get that information to the person who then needs it next. Tasks that rely on one person. Now, I know for one person business, that's a little bit different, but it might also be things with your clients. They rely on you. You're the only person that can do that job. And if you're suddenly overwhelmed and you can't get to it, they're waiting for you. You're that bottleneck in that process that they might have. And that's a problematic workflow. Or work just falls through the cracks, which again, it might be a lot of environmental factors that might be causing issues. It might be that you've never actually documented the way that you need to work. And you just keep getting information in and you're just not quite getting it back out where it needs to go.
Mhm.
Automation is your friend. Automation is my friend, everyone's friend. There's always room for improvement. So there are things that are out there to help you with your workflows. If you feel something's not working, sit back and take a look at it. I found there's a really brilliant quote that I found really recently, and I just want to share this with everyone. ASAP is not a timeline. Isn't that great?
ASAP. Yeah.
It's not a timeline. When you say, I'll get back to you ASAP, that could be in your eyes a week. That could be in the person's eyes an hour. So a workflow also helps you define how long you need to have in order for something to happen. So if your action is to pass something on, you need to define the timeline for that. And a workflow will help you with that. If you automate, it might be instant. I don't know how many people can instantly reply. I mean, I know a couple of people are pretty fast on their emails, but don't take automation for granted, because it might mean that someone can move forward without any obstacle whatsoever, but it might not be there if you don't automate. So just something to think about.
That's a good point.
Okay, let's talk about the customer experience. So
interesting.
When we're looking at that workflow that I showed earlier, how smooth or confusing is it? If you have a website, you have a form, someone fills it in, there's an action afterwards. Does that seem logical to the person that's receiving the information? Do you spell out, you will receive an email within a certain time frame? Do you tell them that you're going to be adding them to your mailing list? There's steps in there that can make the flow a little bit easier for someone when they're in your workflow. Where do customers get frustrated or lost? And this is probably going to be a time issue than anything else, because they're expecting something from you that might take a couple of days. If they don't know that, they'll be going, oh, why haven't I got this? I don't understand. If you're very clear in your workflow about what steps there will be, so it might be when you submit that form, there's a message that pops up saying, we will get back to you within 48 hours. That's a very different part of the flow than just submitting a form and then waiting. I think go back to last week's episode, and where we talked about customer service being a part of your data, and look at the way that you get feedback. Is there a problem that someone's addressing to you in the feedback that you're getting that is because your workflow isn't working as well as it should be? So all of this is tied together.
That's a really good point, by the way. Very good point. People don't actually look, again, that's another point just to dive in here. They don't look at that sometimes as a workflow. The feedback is key. And if it's part of your customer service, there could be something broken in there that if you fixed it, you might get better feedback.
Yeah. You might get more customers.
Correct.
And that's where, if it's in your head, you can't really look at that. You don't have a good perspective or a way of sort of going, okay, I've got that there. What does that mean? Like, really dig into your workflow and ask the question, what does that mean for every part of your workflow? Is it important? It might be that your workflow is too complicated for people. It might be. I know that when I first started out in business, I overcomplicated everything. And it's because it's natural, because your brain's going, well, I've got to put that there, and then I've got to send this, and then I've got to put that there, and then I've got to do that. And it's like the action was so simple, but your brain kind of tries to put all these things in to explain it. I still do it. Don't discredit the fact that my brain kind of tries to understand all the 10 points where maybe 3 are needed. But I've learnt that it's the way I work, and I need to write it down in order to make sure that I don't throw in extra steps that aren't necessary.
Yeah, right.
So look at your metrics. How long does each part of the workflow take to complete? Is it leading to a satisfaction in the process? Are people happy about how things are working? Are you happy about it? Are you converting? So look at your conversion rates, because if you're not converting, then something in your workflow might not be working for you. You might need to adapt it. It might be that you have to build secondary, third workflows in order to then have different probabilities. You have your hot leads, your warm leads, and your cold leads, and you might have different workflows for those different leads. And the error rate. So, for instance, if someone keeps saying, I'm not getting something, then there's an issue in the workflow that you need to go back over it, and always test your workflows as much as you can to see how it's going to come out. Because it might be that you haven't linked something properly, you've missed a step, you haven't included a piece of information at a key point, or it's not getting to the place where it's supposed to go. So errors are feedback, but I think that they can be minimized if you test your workflows and really push them a little bit to make sure that they're as optimal as you want. And remember that data helps you improve your process over time.
Yeah. So when it definitely improves your process over if you embrace it.
Absolutely.
And you use it every day. It's great having it. If you don't use it, it's not going to work for you, right? Yeah. So you've got to make it work for you.
Yeah.
So you've done all the mapping, right, for your business. You got everything in place. What do you do once it's all done?
I celebrate. I mean, the workflows are as I said earlier, you're repeating the flow over and over again. There's always room for improvement. But I think if you have a workflow in place that's working well, can you then take that and apply it elsewhere? So, it's that thing of, if you have a really great product workflow, can you then take that and use it for another product? Can you duplicate what you've got? Can you replicate it in a way that is then working for you? And I think a lot of the times in business, we're trying to find what works for us, and you kind of try something, that didn't quite work, and sometimes you just scrap it and start again. It might be within the workflow. If you map it out, it might be something that's just not quite working right for people. It might be they're turned off by a part of the workflow. So you might be able to work backwards to a point where you go, yeah, I've got to fix that, redirect it, and then you have a much better workflow for your customers. So, workflows are really, really powerful. And I mean, I've got one sitting on my desk where I've mapped out our business data series. So, all of that, I've kind of gone, we want to tie all this together to make it really informative for people, but we need to talk about this here in order for that to then be relevant there. So, I believe in workflows so much for businesses, and that's why I do them. I help businesses with their workflows and understanding them, because I feel like it's something that people don't get out of their head a lot, or they feel very uncomfortable with it because they're unsure about how a workflow works. Yeah. But hopefully today we've given a bit more information to educate.
No, you totally have, and I hope everyone's taken away something away from that today, because every angle that we do, even when you're looking at an online course, or if you're running an event, or you're hosting a workshop or something, you'll all have a workflow that you'll do in that workshop, that workflow up to it, and then after it as well. But, in this day and age, we're living in such a technology-rich world that we're living in now, that we can embrace many areas. We still have the manual side of it. And I'm still a big fan of the old pen and paper and writing stuff down, because you've got to get it out of here somehow. And, we can type stuff together, and I'm not going to swear again, with worksheets and Excel spreadsheets. But again, just writing it out and seeing it. I love what you said before, right? I haven't done this in a while, actually, Louisa. It's got a massive page of paper, a big piece of paper, an A1 size bit of paper. Put it on the table in your office. Have your pens and your color pencil, and just go, right, I'm going to map out what I do. And literally write out your products and services, or anything that you do, your daily routines, and then mark out what you're doing each step with them, what you want to achieve with them. I think that I'm going to embrace that. I'm going to do that again. I'm going to write it all out again when I get time out my busy schedule.
Wonderful. But yeah, and I mean, we'll be talking about AI in the fourth episode. So I want
Yeah.
people to know that AI is it's a part of life now. We have to understand it. And so we're going to talk about that in this series, because we also want you to know, when you're doing workflows, AI can support you, but we know it's not going to change the way that you develop your workflows. It might just enhance it. So stay tuned for that in week 4.
Yeah, I might be controversial here, right? So AI can be embraced not just to give you ideas. It can give you good campaigns. It can give you good structure. If it knows who you are and you've built it into AI and it knows who you are as an individual in a business, it can be extremely powerful. I did something today, just ideas I've got in. I've got something built in that it knows what I'm about. Put something in, it spat it back, and I went, wow, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I wanted to get its own perspective on it as well. Brilliant. Thank you, Louisa. Well, as Louisa said, this is our business data series that we're hosting every single week. It's at 2:00 on a Tuesday. This is our second episode. We're going to be delving into our third episode next week on the 15th of July at 2 p.m. GMT time, by the way, GMT. What we're going to be delving into then, Louisa, is optimizing your business.
Optimizing your business, building your foundations. A lot of what we talked about today is going to be relevant for there, because you can't optimize without understanding what your foundations are, understanding what your current structures are. So workflows really help to see it, but now we're going to be talking about what to do with it.
Love it. See it, now do it. Action it. Get it organized. So brilliant. Listen, everybody, if you're watching and listening today, please don't be shy. If you want to drop a comment into the feed, into LinkedIn later on, once this stream is finished, please drop it in. Myself and Louisa will drop in and answer any questions. Or if I see something, I'll ping it through to Louisa and she can have a look at it in her feed and she'll come back to you as well on that one. If it's on YouTube, we can't instantaneously reply back straight away, but I can look at it later on. So please check it out. Don't forget, if you're watching this for the first time, please sign up to the YouTube channel, which is at Lee Foster Official, where you can watch back all the episodes on there as well. So you don't miss out on anything whatsoever. We've got a few playlists on there for the Newpreneur cast, not just the interviews, but these special editions. And this is my first one for this year as well, with Louisa from Blue Ninja. Louisa, thank you so much for today.
Thank you very much. I love, how much I love talking about this stuff.
Really? I never got that.
Never have guessed.
Never guessed that whatsoever. Thank you so much. Thank you to you all for watching and listening today. And again, we hope you have a great week, and we look forward to seeing you next week at the next edition of the Newpreneur Cast Special Edition Business Data Series. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of the week, and I'll see you all again very soon.